this whole perspective of waking up has to be understood very carefully. What does it imply when those who have been looking more deeply, they are reminding that the human being needs to wake up? It implies that the normal state in which we are going about in the world is not in touch with the reality as it is, but it has some kind of dreaminess, some kind of sleepiness, some kind of projection. This is the meaning when it is said in the East that this world is a Maya. Because the way we perceive the world, we are not perceiving the reality the way it actually is. We are into this mutually projecting process. And I have been often mentioning about it, that we create values, and when everybody is agreeing to these values, it looks like reality. This is what in the internet you can see as virtual reality. But to understand it more directly, some examples will be helpful. In each society there are different values. For whatever reason they have come into existence. And some of them may have been valuable in certain periods of the life process there, but it may not be any more valuable or relevant. It may be even against the sensibility and intelligence in a later period. But many societies go on holding to that. And that will become also more clear when one sees that the values which is held as important or supreme in certain cultural, religious, social structures may be seen very differently, with a very different emphasis in another cultures, another religious background, another approaches. Now, for example, in some religions, when people are eating pig, it's considered to be very unreligious. But in some other religions, some other cultures, it is very normal that people are eating the pork, and it is not considered anything problematic. When you look into the background of it, you can see that in certain periods, in certain cultures, in certain backgrounds, this way some of this has been done was creating sicknesses, were creating more problems, and it had a different emphasis. But one can see there are different ways of seeing the same thing. And just to bring it in a little bit more humorous way, in Italian there is an abusive word where they say God is a pig when they are upset. But you may be surprised, in the Hindu background, God has been incarnating as a pig to save the world at a certain period in the development. So if somebody would say that in that way, it is seen totally different. What I am trying to imply with all this is that one should consider how relative all these values, all these norms, all these concepts are, and try to connect to the reality directly, not following the logical, rational concepts and holding to the words, but trying to understand what is meant with it, where it is pointing to, what is really the essential aspect of all these teachings. Very often, what has been propagated in the name of religion has often been going away from the essential values which are valuable into more peripheral things and reducing everything into a set of rules and regulations to control, to manage, and often to manipulate the society. So religion, culture, and with that all the words and concepts and the logical process has to be confronted wakefully, so that you come to see what is really valuable, and through your own direct experience get the clue what may be really meant with many things which has been indicated. But your emphasis should be in your direct experience. That is why those who are insightful are not asking anybody to be blindly following something, but also not blindly rejecting everything. When you consider, when you look deeply, when you look wakefully, and see what is actually pointed out. That is why in the Sufi tradition they have a saying, the finger which is pointing to the moon is to make you aware that you need to look at the moon, but don't bite the finger. It is a poetic way of saying, don't cling to words, don't cling to concepts blindly. Look what is meant with it originally. What could be the sense behind it? And when it becomes conscious to you that all that what has been in the right spirit, in the right understanding, shared, given, are only indications which has to be taken more on a poetic level rather than on a prosaic level. But in our modern society, where everything is gone about on the peripheral level, where the materialism is the central point, we are used to having an approach where we define everything, where we can control everything. This kind of a terminology, this kind of words are okay when it comes to material things. You can define material, you can define the aspects in the game of the world. But when it comes to the deeper factors of reality, there it is very important to recognize and remember that all words are attempts to indicate something which cannot be put in words. That is the meaning when it is said the human being needs to wake up. But we have to also understand something. There is a great convenience when we can follow concepts and words and rules and regulations and norms, because it gives us the feeling, I know this is right, this is correct, and I am right. You can feel proud, you can feel superior. It gives the human being for the beginning a certain grounding in the game of the duality. Because like every child requires a one-dimensional idea of reality first. The child needs to be told, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. It's just like when you have the signal, when it is red, you should stop. When it is green, you can go. It's a very clear-cut message. That the child can understand, it can function, it can get familiar with the game of the world in this kind of one-dimensional approach. But what we need to see is every rule has to be applied, because sometimes what is good in one moment may not be good in another moment. What may be good for one person in one context may be totally unhealthy, unsensible for another person in the same moment. You can see it in the case of medicines very easily. For one kind of entanglement, one kind of sickness, you give one medicine, which for someone else will be poison. But for this person in that state, it becomes a healing process. And the opposite. And even that what we call normally poison becomes medicinal in certain context. For example, when somebody is bitten by a snake, what is given as medicine is another poison, which is an antidote. But they neutralize each other and the person is healed. So you have to remember not to cling to words, not to settle in this convenience, comfortability of this one-dimensional logical knowledge. And this is also the meaning when in the biblical background it is indicated like this, that Adam and Eve got expelled from the Garden of Eden when they ate the fruit of knowledge. Because they were getting into the game and getting more into the identification with the body, with the personality, and losing the contact to the wholeness. Now we can understand why animals and plants are so harmonious. Because they are still in a state where they are not in any logical, rational, one-dimensional process. They are simply in tune with the whole. Of course, they are not conscious, but they are whole. That is why mountains are in meditation, trees are in meditation, animals are in meditation. We don't need to teach them any of these things. They are in flow, they are in tune. They are life surfing in their way. But for a human being to reconnect to the wholeness of the reality and then use the mind, use the knowledge in service of life, in service of love, this has to be learned. This has to be rediscovered. And that is only possible when you first of all learn to let go and relax and become capable to see things without being trapped in the unconscious automatic projection process. This is the meaning when Jesus says, "Judge ye not." This is the meaning of all meditative process when it is said, "Be like a witness," Sakshi Bhav, or how it is said in the Zen tradition, "Be with a mirror-like consciousness." Don't go into judging, don't follow it, don't fight against it, but be like a mirror which is not going into the judging process. J. Krishnamurti used another expression. He called it choiceless awareness. In practice, they all bring you to a different way of directly connecting to reality, connecting to yourself, connecting to the wholeness. In the yogic teaching, there is an expression where Patanjali says, "Chitta vritti nirodha," which means cessation of the activity of the mind. The mind is activated through the judging process, through the desires, through the dreams, through the wanting. So unless you bring your attention to all these things which are working in you and inwardly get distance to it, you cannot attain to the authentic quality of silence. You can force some kind of silence through some chemical changes or certain exercises for a certain period. But deep within, to attain an authentic quality of silence, you have to learn not to identify with this automatism which is going on judging inside. And that is what leads to the state which can be called awakening. Awakening means you again consciously gain the quality of looking at life without getting trapped in the judgment. Awakening means you come to recognize the uniqueness of each manifestation of life, and that means you suddenly realize when everyone is unique, when everything is unique, how can you compare? Then you can see the falseness of all comparison, all competition, and in a healthy way, then you can see that you can play with these standards and rules and concepts, but they are not leading you to the experiencing of the truth. And that is what Maya is all about. And that is what Buddha puts in another way. He says the world is dukkha. Dukkha means sufferings, pain. And the world becomes pain when you go on unconsciously trying to hold to that which cannot be held on. That what is dreamlike, that what has no real foundation. When you try to hold to it, sooner or later you realize that there is no foundation to it. And then there is pain, there is disappointment, there is frustration, there is sadness. When it is said, seek the truth, it is referring to the need to awaken. Awaken so that we can be in touch with the reality the way it is. It is not a belief. It is not agreeing with somebody or disagreeing with somebody. It has nothing to do with anybody else in a deeper sense. It has to do with, first of all, experiencing who you really are. So this is requiring a very decisive, determined, patient, courageous encounter, which has to go on and on till every trace of entanglement in unconscious process becomes transparent to yourself. That is why it is very challenging. If it would be just a question of collecting information, you can gather the information from everywhere and then you can do it like the paper which is connected with every machine, how to use it, the instruction manual. But the inner work is not an instruction manual. It has to do with becoming aware of the intricacies of the inner process, the subtle traps, the unconscious identifications. And because of that, it needs to be gone about with a perseverance, with a determination. And the one who can be a friend in the inner process is not trying to give you something which he is giving you. The inner friend is one who supports you in your initiative to face yourself, to awaken to your reality. But because there are many ways in which the inner automatism is trying to avoid this confrontation, it becomes very, very important to get reminded, to get confronted. So the help is not just to give you a nice feeling or to come to a kind of comfortable state and leave it like that. You have to be reminded, supported, to come in touch with all that, what can entangle you, what can drown you, what can push you into forgetfulness. when all that what can entangle you, your pride and your prejudice, all the entanglement in every form of judgment, all the identification, when it is all confronted consciously by you, and you are not trapped in that, then nobody can drown you. Even the death cannot take away your clarity. But as long as we have not confronted ourselves honestly and courageously, one can fool oneself in believing that, oh, now I am clear, I am free, I am this, I am that. But when situations come in life where you feel something is provoked in you, something is disturbed in you, something is overtaking you, and this is what comes most when you are confronted with fear. That is why it is said, death is the proof stone. Death is what finally takes away everything of our identification. We cannot hold to the body, we cannot hold to the personality, and all that we call I, me, mine, you cannot hold to. When you become aware of that during the life, when you are still capable to confront, to consider, use your intelligence, go deeper into that what you are, which even death cannot take away. This is the real meaning of renouncing the world. It is not that you have to get rid of everything and then believe that now you have become holy. The problem is not what you have. The problem is our unconscious clinging and identification with the I and the holding which is connected with that. So you can interpret things peripherally, or you can try to understand the sense behind it. There's a very beautiful story which some of you know, but it is valuable to remember again and again because this is touching some very basic aspect. And it may look almost like the opposite when Jesus is saying, it is easy for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to go into heaven, into the dimension of the divine. Both has value, but it will be valuable to consider both. But I want to come first to the story. There was a king. His name was Janaka. He was a very prosperous king, very much appreciated and loved by his people. He was also known as an awakened king. Some sages who recognize his inner quality was sometimes sending some of the disciples to him. And on one such occasion, one sage was telling to one of his disciples, you go visit King Janaka and see what he wants to share with you and then come back. But this disciple was a very proud person with some knowledge that these kings, they are also worldly. They are living in richness and all the luxury. How can they have anything to do with religion and religiousness? This cannot be spiritual. So he was very proud. He went because his master has told him. He tried to go according to that. But inside he was resisting. Why is he sending me to such a person? What is the sense behind it? I will go because he has told me I will go there, stay overnight and come back. So this was kind of attitude in him. And as he came, as it was expected from his side, he saw that they are having some big celebration there, dancing and feasting and celebrating. So he was feeling very uncomfortable. And he thought, okay, I will just stay this night and then go back tomorrow morning. Then I can tell my master that I have been there, I have been in the palace of the King Janaka, and then it is clear. So he ate something because he was hungry, and then he wanted to lie down and sleep. They were providing a very beautiful bed, very in the middle of the room, everything was so fine and fantastic. He wanted to lie down and just go to sleep. But suddenly he saw that above there was a sword hanging, tied to a very thin thread. And any strong wind or any animal coming and disturbing can cause that the sword falls on him and he may be dead. He couldn't move the bed, everything was so set up in such a way that he cannot change anything there. He tries to ignore it. He tried to close the eye. But as he closed the eye, it seemed that the sword is shining more strongly, more dangerously, glittering in this little breeze. He couldn't sleep. Early morning, the king came and knocked on the door and asked him, "Did you have a good sleep?" He was quite upset. He said, "How can I sleep here? This sword hanging right above my head. I could have been killed any moment." Then King Janaka smiled and said, "Look, this is like that. When you remember, death can come any moment. How can you get caught and lost in the material game of the world? How can you get lost in these worldly things of power and prestige and wealth?" Then suddenly it occurred to him, to this disciple, this is what my master wanted me to understand. I was so concerned about the periphery, but this king has made something visible. That it is not in having or not having, it is in remembering that this is all a passing phenomena. This is a passing show. This is something which you cannot hold to and settle with. And this is what is making the difference. When we are in the world but not getting trapped in the world, not getting lost in the game, through the awareness, not rejecting anything, not clinging to anything. Now you can come and understand the other side of it, when Jesus says it's easy for a camel to enter through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. It is so because in our unconscious way of going, we are identifying with the power, prestige, wealth, and clinging to this. Therefore, very rarely there are people who live gracefully in spite of having wealth, in spite of being successful. Many of them are very much in the fear of losing their security, losing their power. And if you look more deeply, you can see it is connected with their identification with the body, with the personality, with the image. And they are not seeing that. In the normal way of going, there's hardly anybody who reminds them of such things. And very few come to the idea that I need to bring my attention here, into this clinging, into this identification. So Jesus is right in this sense, that because people are unconsciously clinging and identifying with the body, with the personality, and going on without confronting the basic issues, it becomes very difficult. The more you have, the more you are trying to cling to it. Of course, you can see in the world also people who have accumulated so much wealth and suddenly they come to see that, what can I do with it all? They have so much, and they start going in diligently, start distributing part of their whole wealth. This is valuable when people can see that it is not in going into the competition and comparison and trying to stay in a kind of idea of power and be with this apparent speciality, but understanding what all this means, what role power is playing, what role wealth is playing, what role prestige is playing, what is meant with going with pride, what is meant with going with dignity, what is meant with the right sensibility. When you consider it carefully and you are not making it an issue of the ego, then you can use everything. Then those who have power and those who have the right understanding, they will use their power to bring more understanding, more sensibility. They will use their prestige to support those who need some help. Those who have wealth, they will share it in the right way. But those who don't have this consciousness, they are going on clinging. And this is why when Jesus is saying, it is easy for a camel to enter through the eye of the needle, which is looking like impossible, than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. Awakening means seeing what is really valuable, who you really are, coming to the recognition of the true nature of our reality, so that we see that behind the body, behind the personality, we are part of one undivided interconnectedness. We are part of that mystery. We have never been separate from the source, and we are that. This is what in one of the Upanishads, as I have been recently referring to you, has been mentioned in this way. Tattvamasi Shvetaketu. It's saying to a seeker, a young person who has been seeking, what is the truth? It is an indication that you are that. Not even calling it God, not even calling it anything, but you are that. That what you are seeking, you are. That what can fulfill you, you are. But you have to understand it. And this comes in this more poetic way in the Tibetan teaching, this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, which means the treasure which you are seeking is in the lotus of your heart. We are used to seeking in the outside, in the world, in terms of achieving this, achieving that. But to look within, to come to an inner state of spontaneous silence, and from this state to connect consciously to that what you are, to stay wakeful and present, so that life can reveal to you that what you truly am. It is not knowledge, it is experiencing. It is allowing life to reveal, which is only possible when we are in a conscious availability, in a conscious vulnerability. When we are not going on unconsciously holding to this nor that and having some kind of defenses around us. This is the meaning when it is said you need to let go. You need to not cling to anything so that you can be available, you can be vulnerable, you can be really open. In human life, the openness can happen again only when you deliberately remove the barriers by bringing attention to the barriers. That is why the inner inquiry is also called inner work, because you need to confront all these things which normally one is trying to run away from or avoid or to push aside. And we have become very clever in many ways to run away when anything is difficult, anything is uncomfortable, rather than looking into it more deeply. We have so many ways to escape. Alcohol, drugs, smoking, or indulging in anything. You can make from everything a way to escape. Because to face the reality at first means confronting all those aspects also which we have been trying to run away from, which has been either frightening or painful or uncomfortable, or which one is ashamed of. So in so many ways we have created a conflict within ourselves. In so many ways our energy is split and is trapped in suppressing many things. And this is preventing us from living the intensity, the dynamism, living totally in each moment. So bring attention to these aspects. What is keeping you divided, what is keeping you entangled. And your readiness to confront everything the way it is, and the willingness to go through moments which are pleasant and comfortable consciously, as well as which are painful and uncomfortable consciously. And this is what will happen in connection with the inner friend, because the inner friend will help you to come in those possibilities and situations where everything what you need to confront can come up in you. And when you confront it wakefully and not run away because something is getting touched which you don't like. If you are going on judging also in this connection, that this I like about this and this I don't like, then you will not benefit. But when you look, whatever is coming up in this connection, not agreeing blindly, not disagreeing blindly, not following blindly, not being against blindly, but looking very courageously and honestly at all that what is getting touched in you, then the connection to the inner friend can become very, very valuable and supportive for your awakening. And this is what you need to understand. Otherwise, there are so many ways and in which you can avoid the confrontation. And whenever you are going with this usual approach, I like this, I don't like this, I want this, I don't want this, are you looking from where your judgments and the decisions are coming? Who is this I which you are referring to? Is that your real self, or is it a conditioned idea of the I which you have become settled with and following ongoingly? When you go consciously, you will start seeing many things which at first may not be so comfortable for you. But once you understand that exactly these aspects one needs to confront, exactly that what is not perhaps looking so convenient and easy, one has to bring the attention to, then you are coming into an inner state of not fighting against the reality. You are accepting the wholeness of the reality and there is a readiness to look. In this readiness to look at that what is, this is what J. Krishnamurti has been calling the choiceless awareness. You are not choosing that I want it or I don't want it. You look at the whole choosing process itself. You are not following it blindly. You are not suppressing it blindly. You connect to the wholeness. And this enables you to come into a state of inner silence where you can attune to the nature of your truth, where life can reveal to you. This is again poetic way of putting it. You can allow it. When you are not going into the fighting approach as you have been used to in the normal way of going, but consciously bring in a quality of wakeful openness, you are opening the way for awakening.